All right, the theme of this morning has been this congressional fight, perhaps looming between the House and the Senate, and then the House Republicans, and then some Senate. There's a lot of nuance to it. Trump has been trying to herd all the cats in advance. We talked about the House Republicans being called to the White House last week, trying to get them all on the same page on this CR, continuing resolution. It appears, again, when you hear people like Chip Roy say, I'm in, when you hear others in the Freedom Caucus say, we're in, we don't like it, we don't even support CRs, but we'll support this one because we trust Trump. This has to get done for all the reasons that I've laid out today. Ed Morrissey is back with us. He's written a similar piece. That's why we thought we would check in with our great friend who wrote Pass the CR and Prepare for the Real Fight. Ed Morrissey, managing editor at Hot Air. Edward, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, sir. Thanks for having me.
So this is important because, in my view, as I just posted on X, if you give Democrats this is the thing they've needed. They haven't had anything. They've been flailing and floundering with nothing. This would be their first real talking point if Republicans hand it to them.
Well, that's one reason, right? I mean, first off, you have to keep government going because now you're in charge of all three branches. Before it was a dispute, well, three branches, two branches, the two chambers and the other branch. You know, you had Republicans controlling the House, but Democrats controlling the Senate and the White House. That's what happened the last two times we had CRs. And that's one of the reasons why people within the caucus were so frustrated by this, is that they couldn't work it out through regular order. This is now all on Republicans. So politically speaking, yes, it would be a huge, faceplant to go into a government shutdown when Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. I mean, there really should be no reason for that. And that's a great point. One I actually don't bring up in my essay. But the other part of this is that we've already given up the ghost on fiscal year 2025, right? We gave up the ghost last year in October when we didn't do a budget through regular order in combination with the Democrats. We've been doing CRs. There's only 6 months left in this fiscal year. And if you tried to start regular order right now to get the other 6 months done, you'd still need a CR to keep the government open and operating under Donald Trump's control. And so, and it would take you a couple of months to do that. That's time you could use to work on the next budget cycle. This budget cycle it's time to work.
As one Republican said in this piece, Ed, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It was an interesting comment. He said it was Ralph Norman of South Carolina. He said, I don't like CRs, but what's the alternative? Negotiate with Democrats? No. He's a Freedom Caucus guy.
Right. And I'm a little surprised because he's one of the guys that balked at Mike Johnson in the last one initially, and then came on board. And so I think the only Republican they're going to lose is Thomas Massie. John Fetterman said he's going to vote for this CR once it gets to the Senate. I think that this thing's going to go through pretty smoothly, actually, in the end, because I think everybody except Thomas Massie is going to recognize that this is not the fight anymore. That fiscal year 2025 is not the fight anymore. The fight is fiscal year 2026.
Yes, and this is a lot of kind of wonky policy stuff, but just so people are clear, let's walk the CR through. Okay, so it passes the House, it goes over to the Senate. How many votes does it need in the Senate?
I believe CRs are privileged. I think all budget items are privileged, so there's no filibuster that applies to it, as long as they bring it up through, the regular process in the Senate. Now, if they have to speed things up, they may need, unanimous consent to avoid some debate time. But if it's going to pass on a party line basis or nearly a party line basis, there's not much point to that. And Democrats have to be careful about looking exceptionally obstructionist here, because if they're the ones that are obstructing this and you go into a government shutdown, it's no longer the Republicans' problem, it's Democrats' problem. And I don't think they want that problem.
Yes. And so then let's go to what we're talking about after this. What everyone's saying is, let's get through this to get to the good stuff. People like Chip Roy, even Donald Trump, they're all saying we got something big and great, but we got to get there first and get past the CR. So what is that big, great thing that they're promising we're going to get to? DOJ makes this conversation different. That's why this promise this time, I think, is different, Ed. Your interpretation?
Well, the same thing. They're going to zero out a lot of budget line items. And in order to do that, you're going to have to, get everybody on board for that. And, don't be too surprised if there's Republicans that start balking at this, because a couple of their oxes are going to get gored in this process as well. But in order to get through that process, you're going to have to go through the committees. You're going to have to go through the regular order process. And there's no point in doing that in this budget cycle. It's better to do it for the next budget cycle, just to go ahead and punt at the current spending levels. By the way, the CR is actually $7 billion cheaper, very slightly cheaper than the current budget trajectory. The cost savings are going to come in the next budget, which is a reason why they have to incorporate all of those DOGE cuts into either statute or a budget in order to make them official, in order to say that Congress is the one that's cutting that money. And that way...
So this is really important. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure everybody understands this. When we hear Elon say, I just found $50 billion in said government department, find that he found it. It's not a pledge of cutting it or clawing it back. Congress has to make it so in law.
Well, that's the safest route, right? There's still an argument whether the executive has to spend all the money. I mean, we've had these fights before. It's called rescission. But there's an argument over that, and I think the administration would like to have that fight in court to get the right to not spend money that it's been allocated. But
which is what the Supreme Court thing last week was about, kind of. There's some nuance to it, but that's kind of what it was about last week. Yeah.
In part, we're going to see more fights over these monies that aren't going to be spent, right, or are going to be redirected, and that's a normal fight. That's what the judiciary is for. You're going to hash all that out. But the safest way to make those cuts real is to incorporate them into a budget or incorporate them into a statute. And in order to get that, you're not going to do that through a CR. You're going to have to do that through a regular budget process.
Elon went to Capitol Hill last week. I was very intrigued and met behind closed doors with Republicans, particularly Senate Republicans, supposedly gave them all his cell number. They're really trying to play up, hey, who the hell's this Elon guy coming in and telling you guys what to do? You know, senators don't like being told what to do. Cabinet people, they're like, hey, I'm the secretary of this and such. You're not going to tell me what to do. Is that real, or is that trumped up, that there's this friction or tension among elected leaders, cabinet people, and Elon?
It's trumped up. Nobody elected Dr. Fauci. Nobody elected Deborah Birx. Nobody elected Francis Collins, who was last seen strumming his guitar at a protest last week. Did you see that clip?
I did see that. I mean, unbelievable.
The hippies will never leave us. I'm just telling you that right now. I'm just saying that. And I come from I'm adjacent to that generation. The hippies are never going to go away. And but I mean, nobody elected those people either. There's only 2 elected people in the executive branch, and they're called Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Everybody else is working for the president. So if Elon Musk is coming in as a special advisor, that's no different than having Dr. Fauci or Deborah Birx standing on the dais next to Donald Trump and Joe Biden during the pandemic. It's the exact same thing. And I would argue that Fauci and Birx and Collins did a whole lot more to regulate people's lives than Elon Musk is doing, just simply by going through the budget.
Yeah, and let's not forget the car czar business and Elizabeth Warren and the Consumer Protection Bureau and the bailouts of the auto companies under Obama, right? Okay.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.